We finally got our answers. It turns out that Bill Bottoms represents a long tradition of deceiving the American public about our out-of-control covert drug operations. In 1986, for example, the Reagan administration unleashed a CIA psychological warfare campaign against a strange target, the American people. They called it the Office of Public Diplomacy. They housed it in the dusty recesses of the State Department, and they transferred to it several of the CIA's state-of-the-art psychological warfare specialists. All of this was unconstitutional. You have to hand it to these people. They're slick. They used our tax money to destabilize us. We discovered that Bottoms wasn't just a drug pilot, or an unwitting accomplice of SEALs either, who maybe just didn't know all that much, as we had been inclined to believe earlier. No. Bottoms worked for the boys, too. Here's a few facts about Bill he'd probably prefer you not know. When SEAL was sentenced by an irate judge in Louisiana to 6 months in a halfway house in Baton Rouge, there was already a hit out on him, supposedly from the Medellin cartel. SEAL was concerned.
The story is there's a $350,000 contract on your life.
That's true. John, there's a risk in all covert operation work. There's a risk in everything that you do in this line of work. That's why the pay is so good.
SEAL defied the judge's order and had armed bodyguards protecting him. They watched over him each night he spent in the Salvation Army Center. Watched over him each night but one, the night he was killed. Bill Bottoms was the man assigned to guard SEAL that night. Bottoms didn't show up. SEAL was shot at close range by a MAC-10 automatic pistol, equipped with a silencer. Right after that, Bottoms went to work for the DEA. For a man described as dirty by more than one source. When asked if Bottoms was in on the hit, Barry SEAL's brother Wendell paused and then told me slowly it's totally possible. There's more, but we want to tell you where we're heading first. We're going to prove to you that the biggest drug smuggler in United States history worked for the CIA. We're going to prove that the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country. That it wasn't just a case of the CIA turning a blind eye. And it wasn't a case of a rogue element. And it wasn't a case of a few bad apples. And no, our guys weren't just looking the other way. And those two poor high school seniors in the wrong place at the wrong time, their deaths were caused by people you and I as taxpayers pay money to, government officials. The corruption in Saline County that allowed the train desk cover-up to proceed with abandon only exists because of the far larger federal cover-up of people and by people with access to the vast powers of our nation's military and civilian intelligence capabilities. So we're deadly serious about Bill Bottoms and his deliberate agency-abetted campaign. Today we think of this man as a slightly desperate, behind-his-quota, door-to-door salesman, looking for a few bonus points at the end of the month. See, Bill Bottoms worked as a pilot in Desert Storm, dropping pre-invasion Special Forces guys in Iraq before the war. Landing and taking off from roads barely visible from the air, it was hazardous duty. But Bill Bottoms got in trouble in Saudi Arabia, personal trouble, and had to be spirited out of the country to avoid being beheaded by those colorful Saudis. So he was discharged for good cause, fired, 2 years short of the 20 he needs for his government pension. And now he needs those end-of-the-month bonus points. Barry SEAL was in business with this company, Major General Richard Secord's company.
Southern Air Transport is a Miami company reportedly owned by the CIA until the 1970s. This weekend, a plane chartered by Southern Air crashed in Texas on a flight to Central America, raising suspicions.
No spook has ever left your fingerprint or a footprint. But in the case of the operations and ownership of this particular company, there's no question about it.
Barry SEAL was working on the same operation Eugene Hassenfuss was. Remember him? Remember how he didn't work for the CIA either?
A plane crash in the jungle is raising new questions tonight about U.S. involvement in the war in Nicaragua. The Sandinista government says its troops shot down a plane carrying weapons for the Contra rebels and captured a man they describe as a U.S. military advisor. A Nicaraguan official said 3 other U.S. citizen crewmen were killed. He described the flight as a CIA operation. In Washington, aides to President Reagan denied even knowing about such an operation and said it had no connection with the captured man, who's identified as one Eugene Hasenfuss. Our report begins in Nicaragua with CBS News reporter Michael Connor.
The plane was brought down in southern Nicaragua.
My name is Gene Hasenfuss.
Where you're from?
Marinette, Wisconsin.
Well, guess what? Congress passed a $750,000 Hasenfuss relief bill last year, so I guess somebody's paying his pension.
Most here believe there was no official involvement, but sources told CBS News tonight it is fair to assume the administration knew what was going on and who was involved.
For what really happened in the Barry Seal story, we found no spokesman more persuasive than this man.
The government testified in the trial that he was responsible. You know how big a freight car is? I unloaded a freight car as a kid. I know how big they are, okay? That he introduced into the southeastern United States in a period of 3 years 8 freight cars, 8 full freight cars of cocaine.
This man is the witness we found who hadn't been gotten to before we interviewed him.
One of the things that Bush's task force was amazed at when he testified before the president's task force up there, which Bush was chairman, they couldn't understand how he evaded the radar screen in the Gulf of Mexico with his planes. And he laughed at him. He never did really explain, but he laughed at him and said that wasn't a problem at all.
He's also the witness to secrets about Barry Seal, who is seemingly immune to intimidation or threats. Why were you trying to subpoena the CIA?
Because we felt like they had documents, exhibits, and evidence that would indicate complicity in this assassination.
His name is Sam Dalton, and he was the attorney who represented the Colombian hitmen who assassinated Barry Seal in the penalty phase of their trial.
He had his own air-sea rescue operation. He didn't have to call on anybody. Like I say, no problem. Everything, he was prepared for everything.
He was running a small airline.
Yeah.
Difficult to do without somebody saying.
And landing this big cargo plane right in Baton Rouge loaded with cocaine.
That was the C-120. That was common knowledge too, was it not?
Oh, I think so, sure. Certainly all the personnel at the airport knew what was going on.
Through discovery, he gained access to something more valuable than gold, the contents of the trunk of Barry Seal's Cadillac on the night he was assassinated.
If it hadn't been for a good state judge with enough courage to back the federal government up, we'd have never gotten inside that trunk. He made them give us that trunk back. And obviously, they had ransacked that trunk and some of the things we didn't get back, but they had missed a few things that indicated just how valuable that trunk was.
Something the FBI wanted you to never know about.
They went into the Baton Rouge police office and literally, physically seized that trunk from the Baton Rouge police and walked out with it. The Baton Rouge police probably would have had to draw their guns to keep possession of that trunk. And actually, the Baton Rouge police should have done that, but they didn't.
Because of his fearlessness and his access to the court system that no one else has been able to gain, he was able to penetrate just a little the veil surrounding Barry Seal.
They wouldn't even honor the subpoena until the state judge, really backed them up and threatened to hold them in contempt.
So it took a state judge threatening to hold the FBI in contempt for them to give you what you should have had as part of discovery.
Right.
And when you saw the contents of what was in that trunk, they were obviously in a ransack condition?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's where that phone number was. Well, the only thing I can conclude is because they were talking to each other very seriously over probably what was a secured phone number. A secured phone. And Barry Seals was in direct contact with Bush.
What you're about to hear now may shock you. It did me.
Barry Seals was delivering arms and money to the Contras. And one of the things that really turned us on about that premise was Barry Seals' ability to buy a surplus minesweeper from the government.
Now, wait a minute. Barry Seal, a drug smuggler, bought a minesweeper from the government?
It was formerly named the Stark, and the name was changed to the Conda. And he was delivering money to a naval architect to refurbish it for use.
How did you find out about the minesweeper?
Well,